Today we're going to be working on my Stampy Cat long nose collection, and again I apologize for the quality of the picture. This is what I could find to create my designs, and today we're going to be working on Squid. Squid is Stampy Cat Longnose's best friend, so for that we are going to use a standard rainbow loom in the aligned position where all the pegs line up with each other. And the bands we're going to be using are blue, red, and white. Pretty simple today. We're going to start with his arms, and for that we're using double bands. We're going to start from the 7th peg from the bottom on the right and put 2 blue bands all the way down. So we want 6 links of 2 blue bands. And we're going to continue this all the way down. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. 2 blue bands from the 7th peg from the bottom all the way down, making 6 links. I don't know if your kids are into Stampy Cat, but I honestly have to admit I enjoy watching the videos with my son. It's quite hilarious most of the time, and pretty clean most of the time, language and whatnot for younger viewers, so that's good. And now that we have both of our arms there, we need to cap each bottom peg with a blue band wrapped 3 times each on the right and on the left. And we can loop these. We're going to reach inside the cap bands, and grabbing both of the bands, we're going to loop all of them forward, making sure that we're forming our teardrop shape. Doing the same thing on the other side, grabbing both of the bands and looping them forward to the peg above. And we can take our holding hook and remove this from the loom. And we can set this aside. For the legs, we are going to take 2 blue bands and put them from the 4th peg on the bottom, and we're going to go down 3 times. On each side. So we'll do the same thing on the left side. 2 blue bands from the 4th peg from the bottom on the left to the 3rd peg, and we'll repeat that a total of 3 times. And we're going to cap each of these with a single blue band wrapped 3 times around the peg. And we're going to do the same on the other side and wrap a single blue band 3 times around the peg. And this too we can loop, reaching inside our cap band and looping both bands forward to the peg above. And this we can also remove and put on our holding hook. And we'll set this aside as well. Okay, and that's it for attachments. Now we're going to move to the banding, and we'll be using double bands throughout, and we are going to put 2 blue bands from the 1st peg in the center to the second peg in the center, from the first peg in the center to the first peg on the left, and the first peg in the center to the first peg on the right. And now we can continue with the head, and we're going to take 2 blue bands and go once down the left side and once down the right side. Now we're going to use our red bands and we're going to put 2 red bands 2 times going down the left and 2 times going down the right. We're going to continue with blue bands and put 2 bands on the left side and 2 bands going down the right side. For the center, we're going to put 2 red bands 2 times going down the center. And we will put 2 blue bands continuing down the center, and 2 blue bands from the 5th peg on the left to the 5th peg in the center, and 2 blue bands from the 5th peg in the center to the 5th peg on the right. We're going to continue down the body now, and we are going to put 2 blue bands going down the left side all the way to the last peg. And if you happen to be faster than I am, we're going to do the same thing on the right as well, and put 2 blue bands going all the way down the right side to the last peg on the right. And as I said, we're repeating this on the right side with 2 blue bands going all the way down to the bottom. Okay, and now we're going to go down the center with 2 blue bands, and we're stopping with 2 pegs left on the bottom. And now we're ready for our holding bands, and for that we're going to take a single blue band and wrap it around the second pegs down. We're going to take a red band and wrap it around the third pegs and up over the second peg. And we're going to do the same thing upside down, a single red band around the third pegs and down around the fourth peg down. We're going to take a blue band and put it across the fourth pegs down. We're going to close off the legs by putting 2 blue bands from the third peg up from the bottom on the left to the third peg up in the center, and 2 blue bands from the 3rd peg in the center to the 3rd peg on the right. We can continue with the holding bands and put a single blue band on the 6th pegs across, the 7th pegs, 8th, 9th, 10th, and we are going to cap this last peg in the center with a single blue band wrapped 3 times. And now we're ready to add our extension to our head. We need to take 2 blue bands and put them from the 2nd peg on the left to the 3rd peg on the left, and the 3rd peg on the left to the 4th peg on the left. And we need to do the same thing on the other side. 2 blue bands from the 2nd peg to the 3rd peg going down the right from the top, and 2 blue bands from the 3rd peg to the 4th peg. And now we're ready for our attachments. We want to attach the feet to the last peg down on the left and the last peg on the right. And our arms we will attach to the 6th peg going down the left and the 6th peg on the right. And now we're ready to loop. So we're going to start in the center and reach inside the cap band, grab the top 2 bands, and loop to the right, and the next 2 bands, and loop to the left. We're going to move to the left, reach in and grab the bottom 2 bands, and loop forward. Then we're going to loop up to the arms, making sure that we stay inside the holding bands the whole way up, and that we are forming our teardrop or raindrop shape. I'm going to do the same thing on the right side, reaching inside our attachment, grabbing the bottom 2 bands, and looping them forward. Again, we want to just grab the bottom 2, and we want to make sure we're staying inside the holding bands, and forming our teardrop shape as we go. Now we're going to loop up the center, grabbing the bottom 2 bands and looping them forward. Okay, so we should have all looped just up to the arms, to the 6th peg from the top, and before we go any further on the left and the right, we need to reach inside the center pin and loop forward, and then we want to go inside that 5th peg in the center, grab the top 2 bands and loop them to the right, the next 2 bands and loop them to the left, and then we're going to go down and reach in and grab the bottom 2 bands under the arms on both sides, and we'll loop those forward. And we need to do this slowly, one at a time, because of the attachments for the extension. So we're going to reach in again on the 5th peg and staying inside the holding bands, grabbing the bottom 2 bands and loop them forward. The same thing on the right side. We're going to reach inside, staying inside all of the bands and the holding band, grabbing the bottom 2 bands and looping them forward. We're going to continue with the fourth peg, just the 2 bands. This is the extension, so you want to grab just the 2 blue bands. And again on the right side, just the 2 bands. Now we're going to continue with the third peg to the second peg. Again, grabbing just the 2 blue bands. And the same thing on the right, grabbing just the top 2 blue bands. Okay, and once we have our extension bands looped, we want to reach inside this third peg and grab all of the blue bands and move them to the outside of the peg. And the same thing on the other side, move them all out to the other side of the peg. For the fourth peg, we want to only grab the top 2 bands and move them to the outside. And the same thing on the other side, the top 2 bands and move them to the outside. And now we can continue looping up the center. Once we've looped from the 5th peg to the 4th peg with our blue bands, we're going to be looking for the red bands, and before we do that, we're going to take our white bands. We're going to take a single white band and double it and wrap it around your hook 3 times. And now you want to reach in and grab those red bands, and before you loop them to the peg above, you want to slide the white bands down onto the red ones. And then you can loop it forward. Again, you need another white band and double it and wrap it 3 times around your hook. And then when you reach in to grab your red bands, you can slide these white bands down onto the red band before you loop it over the peg above. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. We need a white band and double it. Wrap it 3 times around your hook. Reach inside the holding band and grab the 2 red bands and slide the white bands from your hook onto the red ones. And then loop it over the 3rd peg. Again, a single white band, double it, wrap it 3 times around your hook, reach inside all the bands and the holding band, grab the bottom 2 red bands, slide the white bands down onto the red, and loop it over the 2nd peg. And now we can go down to the center, and we want to reach inside the red and blue holding bands, grab the bottom 2 red bands, and loop them forward. All that's left now is to loop our last row. So we are going to reach inside the center pin, the 2nd one, and loop to the top pin. And then we're going to reach inside and grab the top 2 bands and loop them to the right, and the next 2 bands and loop them to the left. Next, we're going to reach inside and grab the 2 bands on the left and loop them forward, and the last 2 bands on the right and loop them forward. We're ready for our Slipknot bands, and we're going to reach inside this top peg on the left, grab a single blue band, pull it up through all of those bands, and form our slip knot. And give that a little tug, being careful not to break the band. We're going to do the same thing in the center. Reach down through the bands, grab our blue band, pull it up through, and form our slip knot. And finally, we're going to do the same thing on the right side, reaching down inside all of the bands on that top peg. Grab your single blue band, pull it up through, and form your slip knot. And now we're ready to remove this from the loom, and we'll start at the bottom. And I realize this is a fairly advanced tutorial, so if you've had any problems at all, please do not hesitate to ask. You can send me a comment below, or I can be found on Facebook or Instagram. So if you run into a snag, just go over the video again and use the pause and rewind buttons and try to figure out where you might have gone wrong. So this is our little ballistic squid. As soon as he comes off the loom, he does need a little bit of tweaking. I'm going to put his arms down a bit to the side. The same thing on the other side, just reaching in and stretching the bands. I'm not going to adjust his feet like I do normally for the other characters to define them. I am going to straighten up this cap band, however. I'm just putting my hook through the cap band, and I will roll those 3 bands, or 3 loops, around my hook to even them out. That's a little better. I'll do the same thing on the other side, just adjust it a little bit. And now the last thing we need to do is to tuck in our Slipknot bands. And I'm just going to weave them through a few random bands at the back of the head to tuck them out of the way. If you wish, you can secure these bands with a C-clip once you've woven them through in a couple of spots at the back of the head, or you can just attach a C-clip to the ends and attach the clip to a couple of bands at the back of the head. It's your preference. I know I probably should be using the C-clips just so that I have a use for them. I know I've heard many people in the group comment on how many C-clips they have, and just often you don't use as many when you're making characters or charms, and so you end up stockpiling them, and I don't know anybody that doesn't keep them, which is surprising since we don't often use them, and I know many people have buckets and buckets of them, so it just, who knows. I'm just going to readjust his arms, and his big mouth on the front of his face. And there you go. This is Ballistic Squid from Stampy Cat Longnose fame. And please, I would really like to know what you think, so comment below. And don't forget to like and subscribe. I have lots more Stampy's Friends coming up, and we're still working on the Archie characters and Fairly Odd Parents, and of course Big Brother. We have a few of those cast members left to do as well. So don't forget to like and subscribe so you can follow along, and let me know what you would like to see me make as well. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.